I turned 50 this year. I found it stranger than I'd expected. I'm old enough to be able to look back and regret some things that I could have done better, but at the same time, I'm young enough to hold on to the illusion that there's still time to correct some of the mistakes. I would have liked another chance. I would have liked to use my time better. I would have liked to be a better student, to be more productive, a more loving husband, and a more caring father. There's so many things that I see now that I could have done better. Every year that passes, I feel just a bit stiffer, slower, and less energetic. I'm lazy by nature. I don't work out. I'm out of shape and overweight. A business trip had led me to stand one afternoon on the balconies of Wawel Castle in Krakow, pondering the last 50 years. Below me, the Vistula river wound its way around the castle walls and disappeared in the distance. I've always been fascinated by voyages to far-off places and heroic adventures, but only as a spectator to the pages of books. An armchair explorer like myself always finds useful reasons not to march out himself. I've been far too busy for adventures, too busy at school, too busy making a career, too busy being a father, too busy finding my way to the next square in some imaginary board game. Now I'm suddenly 50. Am I too late? The Polish author Joseph Conrad spent some time in Krakow as a young man. I can imagine him standing on the same balcony overlooking the Vistula River. Could it be that he thought of this when he wrote these words about another river? But there was in it one river especially, a mighty big river that you could see on the map, resembling an immense snake uncoiled, with its head in the sea, its body at rest curving afar over a vast country, and its tail lost in the depths of the land. And as I looked at a map of it in the shop window, it fascinated me as a snake would a bird, a silly little bird. Like a silly bird, I was fascinated by the river winding in front of me, peaceful and composed. I knew I was coming back to Poland the next year, and then the idea struck me. I would paddle the Vistula River, from Krakow all the way to the Baltic. I would float downstream on sunny days amid the green pastures of Poland. I would meet interesting people along the way, see majestic medieval cities, and enjoy fine meals at country inns. Dreams are wonderful. Upon returning home, I shared my vision with friends and family, just to hear how it would sound when told out loud. And the reactions were surprisingly reserved. They probably knew me too well. But at least my older son and nephew not only liked the idea, but expressed interest in joining me. To them, the idea of watching and even possibly documenting the voyages of an overweight middle-aged man down a Polish river in an inflatable boat was just too tempting to pass by. All of a sudden, preparations had started, and the train of events was irreversible.
Oni mają te dmuchańce, rozumiesz, te szerokie kajaki, to oni muszą mieć te, takie...
And good luck. Good luck.
No, ale dobre, leciutkie. Good. Dziękuję. Cześć.
Taka, jeden chyba? Sorry.
Pergi sana.
So it was that one clear summer day, 3 inflatable kayaks were launched under the critical gaze of Wawel Castle. I waved goodbye to my younger son and wife and watched their concerned faces disappear as we passed a bend in the river. We were on our way. The Vistula River is the largest river in Poland, and sometimes called the last wild river in Europe. The origins of the Vistula are in southern Poland, where it starts off as a small mountain brook in the Carpathian Mountains. By the time it reaches Krakow, where our paths met, it has become settled and mature. From there it flows first eastward and then in a large arch westward to Warsaw, and finally to the Baltic Sea at Gdansk. The total length of the Vistula is 1,200 kilometers, as it divides Poland in 2 halves, the east from the west, a separation line between 2 different worlds. The plains of Poland have for centuries been the point of conflict between these 2 worlds, and the setting for countless battles. The first few days on the Vistula were far harder than I had expected. The strokes of the oars were foreign to our muscles, and even the smallest changes in the weather changed our experience drastically. During these first days, the banks we passed were inaccessible and high, making it difficult for us to guess our location. At the end of the second day, we overshot our mark and were forced to paddle upstream against a headwind. We finally landed and found our way to an old former monastery, where we sought shelter, soaked and exhausted. This was our first experience of the Polish nettles that line the riverbanks, as well as the bloodthirsty mosquitoes. This was also the first of many times I would present myself at a guesthouse lobby, pathetically dirty, wet, and more often than not barefoot. I wonder what the local people thought of us as we emerged like that, through the underbrush, wild-eyed and weather-bitten. I thought I knew the map by heart, but this was nothing like I had imagined the trip would be. As a schoolboy in Italy, my father had learned a few lines from Dante's Divine Comedy that go like this. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. I don't think these lines of poetry meant anything special to my father, apart from the fact that he learned them as a boy and recited them on occasion. But now they came to my mind as I walked the somber halls of this old Catholic monastery. What is my straightforward path? It didn't seem as obvious as it had before. Nothing in our voyage seemed quite like I had imagined it would be. Life is often described as a journey. Sometimes the road forward seems clear, other times not. But usually the final goal is central in the narrative. In the Divine Comedy, Dante travels through purgatory and hell, but his final destination is always heaven, and this is where he finds himself in the end. It's the same in Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Here, Christian travels far and wide and has all kinds of adventures. But in the end, he also reaches the celestial city, which has always been his ultimate destination. This is where victory lies. In the biblical narrative, Moses leads the Israelites on a 40-year-long desert trek. This story also ends with the fulfillment of the promise of a land full of riches and bliss. This is how great voyages end, whether they are allegorical or material, at the final destination. And in the voyage lies some kind of deliverance or redemption. But from what? Where is it that our travels should lead us? We dry out our equipment, patch the boats, somewhat more experienced and more cautious, but still fully committed to persist onwards down the river.
Er þetta ekki vasar?
Nei. Það er svo segir Karl. Það stendur flösku. Not waterproof.
Ég sagði það.
Water resistant.
Water resistant.
Karl, út að bulla.
Ekki skilja mig eftir þetta með brækurnar á hælunum.
Það er að passa væginn.
The days passed, and the monotonous riverbanks crept by at a slow rhythmic pace. A distant church tower, the bark of a dog, a fisherman on the bank, and a highway crossing overhead. Our circumstances changed at the blink of an eye. Sometimes we floated downstream for hours, lying carelessly and sunburned in our boats. Other times, a small error in judgment concerning a good spot to beach, a sudden thunderstorm, impassable riverbanks, nettles, headwinds, and mosquitoes could change everything quickly. More often than not, we finally sought shelter in guest houses soaking wet, hungry and dirty. Each bend in the river harbored uncertainty, challenges and circumstances that I had never imagined in my vision for the journey. While the sun shone, we became careless, relaxed, and determined in our conviction that we would easily complete the journey. But when it rained, we felt that it would never end. Each kilometer seemed endless, and our final destination completely unachievable.
Er hann búinn að sjóða?
Já, tók hinga stund.
Wow. Ok, þá er það spurningar kvöldsins frá stóra system.
Á ég að lesa?
Já, alltaf ekki bara. Nei, ekki lesa.
Ekki lesa.
Þetta er of skakt þess að vera fyndið.
Svona,
Já, ég held að.
fyrsta spurningin.
Þriðja spurning.
Þriðja spurningin, já. Af hverju hefur þið mestar áhyggjur í dag og af hverju?
Karel.
Og ekki nógu mikið að borða á morgun.
Það er ágjörð því.
Jú. Ég líka svolítið, sko. Ég held við séum svolítið með lítið af mat, sko. Við erum með kvöldmat, við erum ekki með mat fyrir, sko, on the road.
Ég hefði verið spurt mig í fyrra kvöld, sko. Þá hefur maður áhyggjur af einhverju allt öðru. Fullt af hlutum. Gat í bátnum og ég veit ekki hvað og svona. Í dag er mest áhyggjur að ég komist ekki á leiðarenda og það verið hlegið að mér. Þetta er búið að vera leitbakt dagur.
Svolítið.
Hvað er menn á alltaf? 20 og hvað? 187 hérna á skiltið. Við lögum með stað með 164. Þannig við viljum segja 23 km.
Það er frekar. Það er ágætt með hvað við chilluðum mikið, sko. Ok. Ég get samt alveg, sko, ég get alveg sett mitt hérna bara því það er einn taska að svona.
I'm middle-aged, and this is probably my last journey down a major river in a kayak. My travel companions, on the other hand, are just starting out and have expectations of other voyages and other adventures. We are travel companions, but we are still at very different places in our journeys. We tend to assess every traveler's voyage based on the circumstances we are experiencing at this very moment, but forget that we are all at different sections of the river. Our preparation, our equipment, and the weather we experience are different. Some are just starting out full of optimism, while others gaze hopelessly at a patched boat on a rain-drenched riverbank. Euphoria changes to disappointment at the blink of an eye. I see my son's sunburned shoulders as he easily paddles his boat far downstream. Just like the Vistula River draws a separating line between east and west, so does age separate us. We represent different cultures and different experiences. We have different equipment for the trip and have different preparation for its challenges. We can be spectators of each other's journeys, but our understanding of them can only be limited at best. Our end goal had always been to paddle the 1,000 kilometers from Krakow to Gdansk at the Baltic Ocean. Just like Dante, who completed his journey in heaven, and Moses, who completed his in Canaan, our promised reward was to paddle triumphantly on 3 inflatable boats out of the delta of the Vistula, to sense the wind in our faces, and to feel the surge of the ocean swell under our keels. This was how the journey was supposed to end. After all, it was written in the script I had made in my mind. One morning, leaving Bydgoszcz, we just had about 200 kilometers left to travel. Our final goal seemed at hand and secure. In the afternoon, we needed to carry our boats past a closed sluice gate. I was impatient, and as I dragged my fully loaded boat onto the rocky shore, I immediately felt that something was not right. A seam in one of the major compartments ripped open. Our trip on the Vistula was over. Our final goal, that had seemed so close just a few hours ago, was now completely unachievable. Our disappointment is hard to describe. How could it be that we would be denied of our prize after all the difficulties we had endured on the way? How could our grand voyage end in a thunderstorm by a sluice in the middle of Poland?
Þetta væri örugglega hægt að líma aftur hérna þennan saum, því það ekkert að bákni þennan laga.
As we sat on the train on our way to Gdansk, I thought about our journey. I thought about Dante. I thought about final goals and promises of redemption at the journey's end. The story of our voyage could no longer be about our ability to overcome all obstacles and reaching our final destination with a victorious sigh of contentment. As I looked back and tried to recall the events of the last 4 weeks, I found that these in themselves had to be the substance of our travels. The essence of our trip could no longer be defined as the final goal, but had instead become each bend in the river, each landing point, each stroke of the paddle. The trip had come to an end, but at the same time it had become infinite, like each fleeting moment, infinitely small and gone, even before we could describe it with words. So, how does the story of our travels in Poland read? In the end, it's not about myself. It's not about my companions, or about the countryside we traveled through. It's about something invisible and intangible. It's about the relationship that has formed between us. It's about the sharing of joyful experiences and about the encouragement we gave each other in the face of despair. The sunny days would never have been named as such without the rainy days to compare them to. Security becomes meaningless without the contrast of uncertainty, and bliss becomes empty unless it's measured against agony. The river keeps its steady pace forward, and everything is under constant change. The only thing we have as a certainty is the fleeting moment. These moments can disappear, underestimated and overlooked, if we focus all our attention on something beyond, some final goal where everything will be perfect, or if our attention is on the past that's impossible to mend or repeat. I turned 50 this year. I would have liked another chance. I would have liked to use my time more wisely. There are just so many things I know I could have done better. But I can't go back to relive even one moment. They're gone forever. The future is uncharted, and no roadmap I draw now can change this. Joy or disappointment, I'm gonna try not to contemplate the things that I could have done better, nor to live my life only to reach some final goal that could be totally different from what I have envisioned in my dreams. I'm just going to try to continue my voyage, floating downstream, through each bend in the river, with its unique and unforeseen adventures, under the rhythmic splashes of my paddle touching the water.